often have you felt restricted to spiritual practices that often seem outdated and of little relevance in today's world? Are you discouraged to express your own creative talents and develop spiritual practices that are uniquely you? The Liturgical Rebels podcast is for people like you who want to reimagine and reconstruct their faith and spiritual practices. It's for those who want to reshape belief and journey closer to God's wholeness with peace, justice, and flourishing, not just for themselves, but for the earth and all its inhabitants. In today's episode of Liturgical Rebels, we continue our series on Celtic Christian spirituality. My name is Sine, and I will be in conversation with Mary Fleeson, who lives on Holy Island just off the coast of Northumberland in the UK. She studied textiles at college, then gained an honours degree in three-dimensional design. Her Christian faith, living on the Holy Island of Lindisfarne, and being surrounded by its natural beauty and visible history have been the greatest inspiration for Mary's art. She also studied early manuscripts and ancient calligraphy from around the world to gain an insight into how calligraphy and illumination have enhanced works, both religious and secular, throughout the ages. Over the last 25 years, Mary has created over 120 pieces of artwork that sell as prints and greeting cards, and has written and designed over 75 books, including devotional, prayer, poetry, and colouring books. Alongside creating illuminated art and writing, Mary creates meditational weavings made from found scraps and yarn, and enjoys teaching people how to create Celtic knots. Mary, it's such a delight to have the opportunity to interview you. I've really followed your work for a long time and have hoped to get out to the island of Lindisfarne to meet you in person. But, it's just delightful. So thank you for being with me today.
Thank you for having me.
And I really have been inspired by your artwork. I just wish that I could do that kind of artwork myself, but I am definitely not an artist. But I was intrigued to discover that your style originated from doodling during school lessons.
Yeah.
I can understand that because I had a tendency to read books under the desk during school. So I know that kind of desire for distraction. But you also studied art and textiles at Stafford College and University. So tell us a little bit of the history of your art and how you developed your unique form.
Well, I think since I was at school, I've been interested in Celtic knotwork.
Uh-huh.
I used to enjoy looking at the work of George Bain, who, excuse me, just getting coffee, who he collected Celtic knotwork, mostly from around the British Isles. He would examine high crosses in Ireland and Scotland and work out how the knotwork was constructed. And that fascinated me, that there was this absolutely marvelous decoration that had been done for centuries. That appeals to me a lot.
It's fascinating. I had no idea. I'm intrigued by it, but I had no idea that, it was something that people would study like that.
Oh, yeah. And I think what's fascinating as well is where you see links around the world to different kinds of knotwork. There's a lot in Chinese decoration. There's some in Greek artwork.
Mm-hmm.
and also, of course, the Scandinavian influence as well. And it's just fascinating seeing the connections and how they must have developed independently.
Mhm.
Or was there ancient peoples that travelled and, passed these skills on? I think
Well,
perhaps
it
mixed with
is
the two.
interesting because, ancient peoples did travel a lot more than I think we realize.
Yeah,
And so, maybe they did come together. I mean, the Silk Road, of course, was well
absolutely.
developed way, way back. And maybe that's where the connections came. I mean, that's
Yeah.
a fascinating thought. I hadn't realized that you got that kind of work in China as well. So,
Yeah, yeah. So I suppose I've always had this fascination for it. Um, I I studied embroidery and textiles at school, and then on foundation at Stafford, and then I actually went on to do silversmithing and jewellery design.
ah,
And one of George Bain's uh, focuses, he was actually a silversmith, and he taught people how to do knotwork on silver using chasing methods.
mm,
And so absolutely fascinating to then uh, reconnect with it, having been interested in it at school, to then
mhm,
reconnect with it at university. And although I didn't really use it particularly, um, I did look at it and enjoy it and study it a little. And then when we moved to the island, um, I found myself uh, wanting to do something creative again. Uh, Silversmithing hadn't really taken off, um, and I'd been exploring other avenues of careers. Um, then got married, then moved here. We had a vision to open a Christian resources shop on the
mm,
island, and as uh, I suppose I got a bit bored of just being in the shop. Um, and whilst it was lovely to converse with people, quite often they would be happy to browse, and I wanted something to do. So I'd written some poems and prayers, and I thought it'd be nice to have a go at illuminating them
mm,
and use a bit of this knotwork that I was so fascinated about. Um, so that's what I did.
mm,
But I kind of shook it up a little because I didn't see the point in reinventing something that's already there. So I wanted to make it more accessible and looser. So I did what I call freehand Celtic knotwork,
mm,
and enjoyed just weaving strands of drawn ribbons, I
mhm,
suppose, and strings across the page as decoration.
mm. Well, the results are just beautiful. I
Thank
must say, I just love your work. In fact, I've just recently ordered some of your books, so I'm looking
They're all
very
packed
much
up and
looking
ready to
forward
go.
to receiving those. Um, but as you mentioned, you live on Holy Island or Lindisfarne off
Mm,
the east coast of England now,
yes.
and I can understand how your artwork has been inspired by the rich Celtic spirituality of Northumbria and particularly of Lindisfarne, by your Christian faith, and also by the beautiful environment of Holy Island. So, tell us a little bit about Holy Island. I've been there once, but it was for a very brief visit because we weren't staying on the island. So, as you know, you have to kind of zip in and out depending on the tides. And
Yeah.
that's what we had to do. So, but tell us about the island. I mean, such a beautiful place,
Yeah.
and also how it's influenced your artwork.
Oh, well. Um, so the island is tidal. It's cut off twice a day by the North Sea. So it has quite a unique um, feel about it.
Mhm.
It's neither one thing or the other. You know, we are both things. We're both part of the mainland and not part of the mainland.
Hmm.
That's an interesting contradiction and an interesting balance to get. We have two famous saints. Firstly, St. Aidan, who came here from Iona and started a monastery at the invitation of the King of Northumbria. And he's kind of my hero. He was very real. He would get beside people and ask them if they knew about God, if they knew
Hmm.
about Jesus. And if they said yes, he would work alongside them for a little bit, chat with them, maybe encourage them in their faith. If they said no, never heard of him, he would talk to them about Jesus. He was apparently very gentle and just loved people and wanted the best for them.
Lovely.
Very compassionate, gave everything away. If he was given things, he just gave them away. So he started a monastery and school on the island, and this is over 1,000 years ago.
Mhm.
And as he died, there was a boy called Cuthbert guarding sheep somewhere over on the mainland in the hills, and he saw what he believed later to be Aidan being carried to heaven.
Mm.
And that convinced him that he should become a monk. So he joined the monks at Melrose, and eventually, after some years, he ended up back on the island. And around Cuthbert, he became very, very popular.
Mhm.
His PR must have been really good. He was known to be very wise, but what I find interesting about him is this struggle between being part of the world. Everybody demanded his time as a bishop and wise leader, and his desire to just spend time with God.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the interesting contradictions that we get on the island, being part of the world as we're part of the mainland, but then set apart when we become an island.
Mhm.
And it's a very interesting thing to contemplate. And I think it's very human.
Mhm.
And it's a struggle that we all have. But I think the island and Cuthbert really represent that very well.
Mhm. Yeah. No, I'm fascinated. I've actually just finished writing a Celtic Advent devotional, which I'm calling "Following an Unfamiliar Path." And Aidan and Cuthbert both, figure in several of the daily devotions that I've written, and I'm fascinated by both of them, and just by all the Celtic saints, because they were amazing in terms of their dedication to God in ways that we kind of hardly seem to know, and their love of the physical world and the natural world. And I know that the natural world on Lindisfarne also is part of your inspiration.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can't fail to be inspired here. We're a protected area in the UK,
Lovely.
on the island. So there are many migrating birds.
Mm.
Not to mention our local sparrows, and eider ducks, and the seals. I go swimming off the island, and quite often the seals will come and join you and that they'll be 10 feet away. It's
Oh, wow.
incredible. So yeah, it's beautiful. We have big skies as well, which I don't know, somehow if ever we're away from the island and we're driving back and we get further and further up the country and the skies seem to get bigger. I know they don't, but somehow they seem bigger. And
Well, I wonder if it's partly because there's less light pollution.
Oh, there's less light pollution. There's less tall buildings, tall trees.
Yes.
And somehow, just I don't know. But we get beautiful sunsets as well, and sunrises, and we've had the aurora recently as well. And yeah, it's just an inspirational place to be.
Lovely, lovely. And I understand you follow the great monastic scriptorian tradition of producing pieces of artwork that give glory to God and help people worship. And I'm reading from some notes about you here. Your aim is to offer an art form which draws the viewer into an experience of prayer, meditation, and blessing. And I must say, it certainly has that effect on me. I often look at your artwork online, and it really is something that draws me into the presence of God. But how did this become central to the type of art that you create?
I suppose I wouldn't really have done it if it hadn't been God inspired. I take don't know how to put it, but I don't think I could have done any of this kind of art or writing if I hadn't listened to what God was telling me. I couldn't have done it under my own strength or my own vision. Yes, I've practiced my art. I've done a lot of it. I've worked hard at it. But the inspiration for the actual pieces only comes from one place. And so, yes, if I do it listening to God and inspired by God, then that means that the focus will always return to God.
Well, and it seems to me that the kind of work you do is a very meditative kind of process too.
Yeah. I mean, it you can't rush it. Although I have got faster over the years. I'm sure I've got faster, but that's down to just practice. But there, for the inspiration, I mean, sometimes I'll get to the end of a piece and think, okay, what am I going to do next? And actually, there isn't a need to do anything next. But when there is a need, it'll come to me.
Nice. I like that. I like that a lot. Now, I know that the Book of Kells and the Lindisfarne Gospels, of course, have been some of the inspirations for you. And I think I first came across your artwork when I was actually doing some research on the Book of Kells and admiring the incredible calligraphy, of course, that is in the Book of Kells and the Lindisfarne Gospels. I mean, it's absolutely fascinating. So tell us a little about how these ancient manuscripts influenced your style, because, I mean, obviously there is some of the same kinds of elements in what you do as there is in the Lindisfarne Gospels and the Book of Kells.
I think what I find fascinating is that these books were meant to be held up to the congregation to show that this was the beauty and glory and wonder that is God.
I didn't know that.
So people couldn't read. Often they couldn't understand the Latin that was being spoken by the priests, but they could understand imagery and beauty. And so you have pages that tell stories, whether, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They tell a little bit of a story. They connect us at a very human level. This is a human being who was close to God, who said these words, who told us about Jesus, who told us about God. So as a viewer, you immediately have a connection. And I think that's brilliant. I think it's lovely.
Yes.
The intricacy of the artwork done purely to decorate God's message. That's great as well, because you can have beauty in other places. There will always be beauty in other places. But these stunning decorations were done purely for God.
Yeah.
To reflect God's glory and God's beauty. So that's marvellous. The Lindisfarne Gospels as well later were translated into Old English. So you can see the words written above the Latin.
Oh, okay.
And that really appeals to me as well, because all of a sudden you are getting the first evidence of this mysterious Latin Bible being made accessible. Not necessarily that the average person could read it, because they probably couldn't, but they could hear it in their own tongue. Now that is such a step forward as well. So not only have you got the beauty of the pictures, the imagery, the knotwork, you've got something that's in your own language.
Yeah.
And so all those stories, all the wonders that are contained in the Gospels are suddenly there for you to understand. And it's again that human connection that we have with seeing humans depicted in the Bible.
Well, I was fascinated. We did go to Malmesbury Abbey on our recent trip to Britain, and to discover that Ethelstan, is it? King Ethelstan? Yeah, that he was the one that had the Bible translated into English. I mean, Old English as it was then. But, we hear so much, of course, about the King James Version and about, the translation under Henry VIII and everything. But, I mean, hundreds of years before that, Ethelstan had it translated into Old English. And to me, that was a delight to find out. And I didn't realize that had been incorporated into the Lindisfarne Gospel. That really fills me with even more delight, because I think that desire to connect the word of God to the common people is something that's very much at the heart of Celtic spirituality. And so it's just intriguing. Now, I know your calligraphy merges old skills with new kinds of materials and new techniques. So tell us a little bit about the kinds of materials you use that would be different from the materials that were used in the Gospels, in the Lindisfarne Gospels.
Well, I mean, the Lindisfarne Gospels would have used vellum, which was calf hide. They used traditional pigments, often, found locally. They would have used quill pens, so made out of feathers. So I've tried a few of those things. Wasn't a big fan. So I use very fine fiber pens, 0.003 for some of the lines, which are very, very, they're like hairline. I use pencil crayons, gel pens, artist's brush pens, felt pens, paint. I work on 400-gram white cartridge paper. When a piece is completed, it gets scanned, and then I can clean it up if there's any little marks or smudges, and then we sell the prints. So I don't sell the originals. Generally, they're kept away.
Yeah.
I've never wanted to get into the idea of exhibiting exclusively and selling in art galleries and that kind of thing. So yeah, that's I use totally modern things and enjoy that. It's good fun.
It must make you appreciate the incredible skill of the ancient monks who used these much more difficult kinds of techniques.
So they would have had younger monks to do all the preparation.
Okay.
So they wouldn't. For instance, Eadfrith, who created the Lindisfarne Gospels, he probably wouldn't have had to have sat there and scraped the vellum till it's clean and stretch it and do all the preparation. They had light boxes. They used light boxes which would reflect from a light source, maybe a candle with a copper surround reflected onto another reflective surface like copper, which would reflect under a thicker vellum suspended on a rack. And that meant that then they could draw their pattern out on the reverse of the page using, interestingly, a lead pencil. This has been discovered in the last sort of 20 years that they used lead. So it was the first lead pencil.
Fascinating.
Yeah, so they would draw the pattern on the reverse and then create the correct lines and painting on the other side. So there's no sort of sketching it out first. It would be done on the reverse. So that meant it was all a lot tidier and with much finer lines. I did some experimenting many years ago with what they might have used to get those very, very fine lines, because it was thought to be a quill pen or perhaps a hairbrush. But I did some experiments with seabird feathers. And found that they held the ink better than fur.
Yeah.
And you could get an incredibly fine line. So I think they had all mod cons that were available
at the
to
time.
them at that time. And as I say, the artists themselves wouldn't have had to prepare the paints, the pigments. Somebody would have done that for them. So I don't think it was, maybe the working conditions weren't as great as I have. But what really shines through is the skill of the artists. So Eadfrith was a great draftsman and a great artist and a real creative. The actual tools that he used probably weren't that difficult. It is how you use them.
But such creativity. I mean, I have always wondered how in a time when there weren't any electric lights, how did they work? How did they achieve these amazing things when, particularly in the winter, and you had so little light, and the creativity that went into developing techniques that would work is fascinating in itself.
Yes. I mean, I think they were very adaptable.
Yes.
You can't really compare it to how we operate now.
Yes.
But you can be sure that they would have done everything they could to make it as manageable as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So they were very clever with their light sources. They had fires.
Mm-hmm.
They wore gloves or mittens.
Mm.
And they worked in daylight. And if it was a miserable day, then maybe they did something else that day.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah, it's fascinating. It really fascinates me, and I think your knowledge of it is quite incredible too. It's fascinating to learn more about it. Now, as well as your calligraphy, you create meditational weavings
I do, yeah.
made from found scraps on the beach and
Yeah.
such, and yarn. I'm very intrigued by that because I'm a collector as I travel of rocks and seaweed and all things. I think, oh, here's a technique that I think I'd like to try. So tell us
Yeah.
some more about that.
Well, this started really during lockdown.
Uh-huh.
We had an interesting lockdown. Obviously, we had to shut the shop, and we were closed for quite a long time. We concentrated on doing mail order, and that was lovely. And I got to write, and it was quite nice not being pulled in lots of different directions. But we also had quite a traumatic time. We lost both our dads,
Oh no.
my husband and mine. And so it was not, it was very stressful. Um, and I did work on pieces. I did stuff for the scriptorium. But I also, I suppose, wanted something different to do. And although I quite like crochet and knitting, I'm not somebody who can take a pattern and make a jumper. I can doodle crochet and doodle knit, but it doesn't come out as anything much recognizable. So I'm also a collector, always going around the beach and trying to just, I don't know, collect things that catch my eye, often man-made things, bits of pottery, glass. Then there's driftwood, bits of plastic that you find off the fishing, bits of fishing nets, wire, all sorts of rubbish that comes up on the beach. And I had quite a lot of it. And I still love embroidery. And I'd done a bit of weaving a few years before. And I don't know how it quite started. I think I found some old bangles. And I just thought, oh, I could do some tiny little weavings using those as a frame and do some embroidery in it. And so I just had a go and made a whole box full of them and made some larger ones. And I've carried on. I just love doing them. And so we sell them in the shop now. Only because I've got so many, I didn't know what to do.
Well, I can imagine it is a very relaxing kind of, I create little contemplative gardens, like, just 6 inches, a foot or something like that. And,
nice.
Because plants tend to multiply, and then I can use some of the things I found in those gardens as well. And it's very, very relaxing. I mean, it can help a great stress reliever, I think.
Yeah. Yes.
And it sounds as though what you found is the similar kind of thing.
It was a way of, I suppose, occupying my hands, my mind with certain problems to solve, because actually when you're creating a tension in this ring and you've got to get the tension right because it will distort if you don't. You've got to attach things that aren't normally attached to anything, broken bits of pottery and wood and all sorts of things, and you've got to problem solve. So it occupies your mind, it occupies your hands, but then it leaves your spirit free to just be and just rest. And I suppose be not being pulled in lots of different directions because you are focused on the one thing. And so if you do that in a prayerful attitude as well, then it allows God to speak to you.
Wonderful. That is very inspiring to me. I know that I'm going to be kind of experimenting with some other forms of creativity too.
Good.
So one of the things that you have mentioned too is that you also get inspiration from music, poetry, and prose. And I was intrigued by that as well. I mean, I am similarly inspired by these sources, but I'd love to know how these are translated into artwork for you.
Well, it's been quite an interesting journey with music. I'll start with that. We have friends who were the founders of the band Iona. I don't know if you've come across them, Dave Fitzgerald and Dave Bainbridge. And they became friends not long after we moved here. We were introduced to them by somebody else living on the island. And my husband and I had always loved Iona music and had gone to their concerts when we were younger and that kind of thing. And they, in their music, I suppose, managed to encapsulate the spirit of the Celtic Christianity in the flowing, long sort of rifts of music and in the storytelling as well. And their passion for the places where the Celtic stories come from. So I already had a love for their music, then met the guys, and they were inspired by my work. So that's been a fascinating link in that they then wrote a CD based on my first book. And then there was, let me get this right. There was a piece of music that they wrote based on my work that then inspired me to do another piece. So that was lovely. That was absolutely lovely. So yes, they continue to be an inspiration. And I know you've spoken to Jeff Johnson.
Yes, I know Jeff well.
Yeah, he's also become a friend of ours, or has been a friend for many years. And his music, I feel, does the same thing. It just encapsulates the Celtic, whatever this Celtic thing is, he's got it and it works.
Yes.
And so I love his music, also for the storytelling aspects. Yeah, absolutely lovely. So always been inspired very much by his work. When it comes to writing and other people's writing, I've always loved science fiction.
Me too.
Yeah, big fan of C.S. Lewis, Cosmic Trilogy. There's a British author called Stephen Baxter who writes science fiction brilliantly. And I think science fiction has been great because it stops you limiting possibilities. And when you can imagine outside the box and you can imagine beyond your experience, that helps me to imagine the amazing and immense things that God can do.
Yeah.
I'm very keen that we don't put limitations on God.
Yes, I would agree. Yes.
So I think, science fiction has helped me to do that, to not put limitations on what's possible.
Yeah. No, I'm in the same place. I've been inspired by science fiction and that way that it stirs one's imagination to think outside the box in many ways. And, a lot of what the Liturgical Rebels podcast is about is helping people to think outside the box. And so, yeah, you kind of put a spark in my head. I thought, who are science fiction authors that I should be interviewing next year for this? So you never know. Is there a project you're working on at the moment that you'd like to share with us?
Well, I mean, I've just finished this In Every Place, which is prayer spaces. Quite excited by that.
I just looked at it online because you can flip through the pages, and I thought this looks very intriguing.
Well, I think it's a culmination of a lot of experience that we've had over the last 20 odd years of creating prayer spaces using the artwork. And we can get it blown up from A4 size, which is like that, to wall sized. And it's quite exciting what you can do with a piece when it's almost life size. I have one piece called Life in Christ, which is the figure of Christ with his head bowed and little people scattered around his body, some entering into his heart, some clinging onto his robe, one in the sleeve of his robe, which was me when I drew it with my baby in a sling. And we recently had that enlarged to human-sized adult. Slightly taller than me. And the sense that you get of actually stepping into the presence of Jesus is it's powerful.
Powerful. Yeah. I can imagine.
So some of the experience of presenting these prayer spaces using my work, little hints and tips of things that I've done over the years, like little prayer inspiration boxes, just containing things that help you to get into a place of prayer. And then how to pray in all sorts of situations, when you're visiting a museum or art gallery, when you pass through doorways of shops, when you're outside in the countryside, seeing God in the ordinary. And just it's a bit like making, well, it's called In Every Place, but it is making every place a prayer space.
Wonderful.
So I've been really excited by that. I'm working on a new Christmas piece. This is going to be based on We Three Kings.
We Three Kings. Yeah. Oh, lovely. I look forward to seeing that.
Yeah. Hopefully I'll do a little devotion book to go with that, because I did that last year with some of the carols that I'd used in Christmas pieces, and I really enjoyed doing them, and they were received very well. So
wonderful.
What else am I doing? Working on another weaving. I've got about 4 other little poetry books on the go.
Oh, wonderful. And people tell me I'm prolific. Yeah, I think you're much more prolific than I am.
Well, I tend to have a lot of things going at the same time. And then whichever one sort of grabs me at the time, I can run with. But I always have something.
Wonderful. Yeah. Wonderful. Mary, it's been such a delight chatting to you today. And thank you for taking the time. I know you haven't been well, and I'm so glad that you have recovered enough to be able to spend this time. So thank you, and all the best with all the projects that you're working on, because I know they bless a lot of people, and hopefully through this might bless even more that people would come to know. And of course, the information about how people can connect to you will be in the show notes. So they will know how to connect to the Lindisfarne scriptorium and view your wonderful artwork. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
In this episode of Liturgical Rebels, I have been in conversation with Mary Fleeson, an artist inspired by Celtic spirituality and the natural beauty of Lindisfarne, or Holy Island, off the east coast of Northumbria. Mary shared her artistic journey, the influence of ancient manuscripts, and how her faith shaped her work. Our discussion also explored the meditative process of creating art, the evolution of materials used in her craft, and the inspiration she draws from music and nature. Mary highlighted her current projects and aspirations, emphasizing the importance of making art accessible and meaningful for people. In the next episode, I will be in conversation with David Cassian Cole, the founder and executive director of Waymark Ministries. He is an international spiritual teacher and retreat leader. He has lectured in a variety of Christian institutions and appeared in numerous television programs. He is the author of 8 books, including Celtic Advent and Celtic Lent. He was deputy guardian of the community of Aidan and Hilda, a Celtic-inspired new monastic order, for several years. He is a certified Reiki practitioner with a master's degree in Christian spirituality, specializing in the Christian mystics. He wrote his thesis on how historic Celtic Christianity can inform new monastic ideas of discipleship. I am Christine Sine, author of Celtic Advent, Following an Unfamiliar Path, a new devotional book that guides us through the 40 days of Celtic Advent beginning on November 15. My other books include The Gift of Wonder and Digging Deeper, The Art of Contemplative Gardening. All my books are available on Amazon. I also facilitate the Godspace Light website and write regularly on Substack. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the podcast. Please also share it with your friends or join me on Substack, Instagram, or Facebook.